everyone, welcome back to the news. Today, I think we've got something interesting because basically, we think the review situation with Kenna Bridge of Spirits is a complete shit show that is not particularly great for the consumer. Because things such as the price of the video game and the context in which the video game has made are not being taken into account in reviews. A few reviews of which I've noticed have been very, very short and not that good. And as somebody yourself, Matt, who has played the game, you certainly have found yourself running against these reviews thinking, what the hell is going on here? And it perhaps seems like this is another reviewers versus consumers-ish situation. I mean, a lot of that is just people have different opinions, but it is a bizarre situation. Another interesting bizarre situation that happened to us was, say, Deathloop, where I massively benefited from your advice on how to play that game correctly, and perhaps there were things that reviewers should have noted in their reviews. So to get into it with Kenna Bridge of Spirits, the first thing we wanted to point out was the Polygon review, which we thought had some extremely strange... This is maybe a handy jumping off point for us.
It definitely is.
Yes, so... You already know the rhythm and flow from countless other games. It's 2018's God of War without gruesome finishing moves. It's Ghost of Tsushima without the expansive cast of characters. It's Horizon Zero Dawn without the sprawling scope. So, shockingly everybody, a game that was made by 15 people that did not come out with an RRP that was full AAA game price, was not able to completely compete with God of War, made by Santa Monica Studio, Ghost of Tsushima, made by Sucker Punch, and Horizon Zero Dawn, made by Guerrilla. All massive, extremely well-funded, first-party Sony developers. Continue.
There is such a lack of nuance in how Polygon covered it and how a couple of other places covered it that really, really angers me. As someone who's played the game and thoroughly enjoyed it for what it is, it just feels so, it almost feels like just punching down on an indie developer because they didn't do anything special. It genuinely looks like so many of these reviews, some of them are, kind of justified in what they say from their perspective, but there's some of them just look like they're looking down their nose going, oh, this wasn't worth my time. But it's coming from the perspective of, and here's my general hypothesis. So many reviewers from the mainstream side of games media are so concerned with being critics that they've completely forgot that their role is substantially more to be along the lines of consumer advocates. At least as far as I understand, as far as I think.
Do you mean that a product review is supposed to be made for people who could potentially be interested in purchasing the product?
That's what I would hope from a review.
So
that's what I would hope anyway.
Matt, how much money did you pay for this game?
So I paid, this is definitely, compared to some indies, it's a bit high. It was $32.99 for PS5 and PS4. Oh, yeah, both versions, same price. One box payment.
Almost as if it's the same game with different settings, depending on the hardware.
Almost, you would imagine. Unbelievable. Hard to believe. But that was $32.99. And the game is, ostensibly around 8 to 10 hours long. It's not extremely long. I think I'm about a third of the way through after about 4 hours because I've been kind of soaking in the sights instead of going video game must finish. So it's definitely, but as a value proposition, I would say buy Kenna Bridge of Spirits over Deathloop. Unless you're specifically that genre you're super into and not for Kenna. But as an overall experience, I think it's so much nicer. It's so much better. But so few of these reviews get into that because they're too busy looking at it going, it's not incredible. This isn't the greatest new thing that's ever happened. This doesn't push forward the medium of video games. And I'm just sitting here thinking, but it's good. It's good and it's fun.
That's what gets me. It doesn't have to push forward the fucking medium of video games. Its job is to be a good video game that is doing what it sets out to do well. And seemingly, by all accounts, it actually does that.
Yep.
And does not charge a price that is well beyond what it should.
Yeah, so there's a couple of reviews that I kind of think are on the money. Mm-hmm. There's Destructoids, which doesn't go into a lot of detail, but it's kind of going, they've actually covered things in some amount of depth. Then you go to IGN, Surprisingly, IGN's review was one of the better ones that I'd read, because again, they took the time and went, okay, well, here's some of how this stuff feels, here's how this plays out, here's some of the ideas involved, actual reviews, as opposed to a lot of them being overviews with some opinion mixed in, and not opinion on specifics, like overarching opinion, so you wouldn't really know what to feel overall. And then the best one that I've encountered was Skill Ups, where, Skill Up was able to just, free of the shackles of having to write in the sort of games media way, just talked about it for 20 minutes and got every point that I thought was important to people who want to play it, which is a lot different from how a lot of these reviews come across.
Yeah.
And that's the part that really makes me think this is something worth talking about. There's a couple other reasons I think the game's worth talking about, but this is like an important one where it just, if you're reading reviews, you're liable to be kind of misled. That's what it feels like anyway.
I think that's why so many people appreciate what Skill Up does. Yeah. And it's a sort of thing, you understand yourself, and then you understand the reviewer. Mm-hmm. And in the case of Skill Up, it's like, I know that I'm not as much into loot-driven stuff as he is, but generally, other than that, I do find I agree with them in the same way that, like, with, say, Total Biscuit, I would know where we would have points of difference. I know where we have similarities, and that would mean that I could, really enjoy what they did. And I think maybe a through line between both of them is that they both tried to do very just consumer-oriented stuff, like, hey, you're a player of games, well, this is my review as a player of games. And it's really strange because often you do get that from the games press, but sometimes you can just see that there's something else going on. Yeah. Because in a way, doing a review of a game, like, it is critique, but there is just that little difference of maybe just that expectation of, pushing the medium forward. And all of that versus, hey, you're a player, you like this kind of thing, you haven't actually played an excellently executed game like this in quite some time because they've sort of fallen by the wayside. Well, if that's the thing that you want, then this game's probably a 10 for you.
That's the thing that gets me more than anything else. So much of it goes, this is unoriginal. Because, VGC absolutely put it to the ringer. Give it a 3 out of 5, says, it is a completely inoffensive, if somewhat bland adventure that will mildly entertain for the duration of its runtime, but won't live long in the memory. And I think some of that could be down to VGC getting sort of snubbed as well, because they did an expose last year on rumors that there were no conclusion to it, I think, as far as anyone actually knows. But there was someone felt that, I think it was a lead designer, claimed they were pushed out, and a lot of their work was used without being paid for. And, Ember Lab said, no, this categorically hasn't happened. These are false accusations, and there was no conclusion which way it went. And that kind of also brings in the point that a lot of reviewers didn't get a code until quite late, which means they kind of, as you yourself know, the PC Gamer review was 1,100 words, which really wasn't enough to get any of what you want to talk about in a game like this across.
Sometimes, you get some of these, I'm not saying this is what any of them specifically are doing, but you sometimes get a little bit of sneering at YouTube from, games journalists and shit. And I just think, if I write a script for something, it's going to be between, low end 2,000 words, high end could be 4,000 words. And usually the first draft, can be a good bit higher than that. You look at one of Skill Up's long, in-depth reviews of a game. That's fucking long. You're going to learn about that game and know what is going on. Why is it that with some of these reviews, you basically come in, you get a shotgun of opinion, sometimes sort of strung together, sometimes just seemingly randomly shat out.
Yep.
But you sometimes, or very often I find actually, you get that without them actually doing the fucking groundwork of explaining to you as a consumer what the game is actually friggin' like to play. So you're just kind of left with, sometimes anyway, you're just left feeling a bit more stupid than you went in.
Yeah, it's funny to me because I know my thoughts that I've listed in this doc towards the bottom are literally bullet points. So things for me to talk about, things I felt when I was playing a little bit. And that's nearly 400 words, about 375. And that's bullet points where I don't go into depth on narrative. I don't go into depth in world. I literally just go, here's some kind of thoughts I had that are quite nice.
That would probably be 3,000 or 4,000 if you actually expanded on all of those words.
Yep.
Let's be real. And that would probably take you, 2 hours?
Probably 2, yeah. Probably 2, 3.
Because it's not going to be like a mega complex type of... Yeah, it wouldn't be a mega complex thing. You need to massively copy edit all the time.
Yeah. Just be.
So it's very strange to me. So yeah, it's that thing of there seems to be quite a strong novelty bias.
Yeah.
Within within the review scene. I think for a lot of people, they're not exactly looking for that. And perhaps that is something that we need to start thinking about a little bit more with reviews.
I mean, obviously there's a question of objectivity versus subjectivity, where obviously subjectivity is going to play a part in it. But it feels like VGC and PC Gamer both were substantially below the average in terms of what people were rating it as. And they didn't really, at least as far as I'm concerned, it wasn't super clear why, outside of, I didn't really feel it, which is fair, but you'd expect a little bit more from a consumer standpoint rather than this was boring.
It's like if you're a professional reviewer, like, I actually want to know more. I want you to deeply interrogate your own thoughts and tell me why for all of them. It's like there's times, I'll see, let's just say somebody tweet out like The Guardian doing a movie review, and I click on it, and it's like 700 words. And I'm just thinking, in what universe can you just slap out 700 words, give something a few stars, and think that that is an acceptable job as a review? And then I look at YouTube, and I look at, say, what Film YouTube does. Is it any fucking wonder that people prefer that shit? That there is so much more just passion and utility versus what seems to be shat out for the publications.
Yeah, I mean, and this harbors back to where you look at Metacritic and OpenCritic, for examples, where, kind of, as an example, is a little bit funny because I think a lot of people rated it higher than their written stuff comes across as. A lot of the really scathing reviews were unscored. So it is sitting very high, and I think I agree with that. But one of the things I will say is it is, how to put this? It's a little bit misleading because the higher scores are also bad reviews. Well, okay, not bad reviews, but they aren't very useful reviews. But they scored very highly based on the novelty bias, based on some parts that I think are not quite as important to overall the experience. Like, as an example, the DualShockers review gave it a 10 out of 10. And I don't think that's entirely fair, but going through it, the reviewer was very clearly utterly enamored by the Pixar-like elements of it. The fact that the animation studio did an exceptional job with cutscenes, told, not a stellar, but a fairly nice narrative that tugged at the heartstrings at the right time. And you can tell that wasn't a useful review, but in this case, it's like bias on both sides of the fence kind of pulled it into a middle where it belonged. But I think if you read like almost any review individually, you wouldn't get a good feel for what it is. And that's why I wanted to point out the IGN one specifically, because like the kind of synopsis of the review is, with its elegantly simple combat and beautiful world, Kena Bridge of Spirits harkens back to the days of the N64/GameCube era Zelda's, Okami, and Star Fox adventures, while also adding modern sensibilities and a distinct personal touch, which is, a bit of a summary, but basically perfectly on point, where the game itself, for a bit of clarity, is extremely old school in just the right ways and extremely well executed, where you can tell maybe it's not, the combat doesn't feel like Devil May Cry 5. Of course it doesn't. The world isn't as big as Horizon Zero Dawn, because of course it's not.
I cannot believe this.
Yeah, so of course it's not. But the point is, the game is better by what it isn't than what it is, which might sound a bit difficult to kind of explain unless you've got your hands on it. But there's nothing extraneous. It's the kind of thing where if you go and just do something perfectly simple, there's nothing in your way. They don't go, shit, we're out of content, here's a load of map icons to work with. It is like they very intentionally picked a very small number of things to do correctly. They put their focus where it mattered. And I see almost no one, I think it was Destructor, the only people who pointing out, going, they bit off exactly what they could chew as a studio, played entirely to their strengths. But then there's this weird thing, because it looks good, and because it's a PS5 game, and then a console exclusive, everyone has these really scuffed expectations. But no one's talking about it clearly.
And I think, so that's another important bit, maybe one of the final points for this video. There are reviews that don't mention the context of this game.
Yeah.
There are reviews that don't mention that it is at a lower price than some of those big expensive games that comparisons are being drawn to. There are reviews that do not mention the size of the team, that this is an indie game. It's an indie game that looks fucking gorgeous, and it's as if it's actually looking so good that it's hurting it because people are getting these weird, wacky expectations. And I think for a reviewer, it would be good to inform the consumer of, hey, this is a game that is roughly this long, that was made by around this many people, and costs this much money. And these things are not just random factoids. These do actually change how we think about the review.
Yep. Yeah.
And it seems like that bit of basic consumer just informing has not really happened.
That's what it feels like. It's like there's so much lack of detail that I think would be really important for people to feel. Because even the IGN one that goes, it's like these PS2 GameCube era games, I don't think anyone ever elaborates hard enough on what that is. Because one of the things that I found, this game is a complete breath of fresh air to me. And I'm someone who plays a decent amount of indies that try loads of different things, but this completely eschews so many modern sensibilities, where you can tell when you play it, the developers sat down and went, we're going to make a game that is a game like we liked. Something from the PS2 era, something from maybe attacking the Power of Juju, maybe a Jack and Daxter kind of thing. We're going to take elements of that, but it's also 2020 or whatever, whenever they started working on it, designing it. It's also, 20 years on. So we're going to have to take concessions from modern games and we'll do stuff correctly. But I see so little reviews actually talk about that in a way that's meaningful, because it's not like Horizon Zero Dawn. There are no like map icons. Collectibles, you use your eyes and your ears to play the game. You don't play the map. And coming from someone who's played Horizon Zero Dawn and Infamous Second Son recently, that's been incredible. Where I use my eyes and ears to play the actual game. And it's, it's designed in that way.
For a modern game, that's shocking.
Yeah, so it feels old school in perfect ways, but it also has modern sensibilities where playing the game, outside of a little kind of thing with movement sometimes, on like kind of starting up your animation's a bit slow to get there, but it feels great. And I don't see many people talk, because I think it was Eurogamer said they've got unoriginal and like the execution's kind of poor. I'm like, it's really not. Like on the game mechanic level, there's just small things you see all the time. Like when you get spirit bombs later, the quickest way to detonate them is to hit them with an arrow afterwards. And that just means you go through this game playing really simple mechanics, but they're executed really beautifully, and you're having this wonderful time. So you can tell that the intentionality of the developers was there. And I feel like those developers have been done a deep disservice by no one sitting down and going, okay, well here's literally what they were trying for. Here's what actually works out okay. Here's all the different design elements, all the different little nice touches that are fundamental to how you like playing the game and how you enjoy playing the game. And it, like, people, the reviews just haven't done that job. That's what I think is really, really, it's frustrating to me, because I was enamored by the idea of it, so I picked it up. But if I had been reading reviews, I likely would have strayed away.
Do you think that, like, in modern games, like, we're so focused on, like, systems and progression and all of that, that, in a way, we've maybe forgot how to talk about the very basics of executing something well?
We definitely have. I think I don't remember the last time I've seen a game review or a lot of game discussion where it's literally about the specifics. And I know that you can kind of lose your way there, but it's literally just every little bit is designed in a way where you go, okay, is this new? No. Is this fun? Yes. But I think that's one thing we've lost in video games, is the idea of fun. Like literally the every button press is nice and good and feels smooth. We've kind of lost. I don't know if we ever had it, to be honest, but we've definitely lost that part where I think Kenna is so much better than so many other modern games because of that.
Yeah.
Because it's just, okay, they've done, literally you press a button, it feels good. You've got modern concessions like, the idea of good UI design, like great UI design. Because it's like a modern staple, no one's really in reviews talked about how just perfect it fits and how like it rides a line of minimalism. So you never really have to look at your HUD, because when you're aiming arrows, you see the little, you see the count of arrows you have left in the middle of the screen. You see the recharge times in the corner, but you hear it with a very pleasant little sound. And it's all those little specifics that, you pay attention to after you've played a bunch of games and are deeply thinking about a game that you don't whenever you're just kind of going, what's this like, whatever, 500,000 words, get this review out the door.
Yeah.
And it's really... I really don't want... obviously, the Metacritic scores worked out okay for them, but I feel bad for Ember Labs for coming out with this game that is very, very clearly had a lot of love put into it, and it's worked out very well, but they've kind of went, the reviews haven't done them justice. That's what it feels like,
So I think if we were to give anyone just some next steps, if you want a review, Skill Ups is great.
Yep.
And we're not saying that because there's agreement. We're saying that because it's an actual good in-depth review where you will come out of that review knowing what's up.
Yeah. For a bit of clarity, I do agree with a lot of the criticisms of this game in terms of like from an objective standpoint. There are a lot of problems with it in terms of how it can be boring at times in terms of what it gives to you content-wise. The narrative stuff's a bit awkward. It runs at a solid 60, but then when it goes to their animation studio, beautiful cutscenes, it's 24 frames per second. That's really jarring. The narrative stuff, VO work isn't stellar. There's a lot of problems with it, but the problems pale in comparison to how well considered everything else is. So it's not a matter of me going, yeah, these reviews are all in complete disagreement with me. That's why I take issue. It is literally just, I feel like the game's been hard done by the nature of reviews.
Yeah, so there we go. Check out Skill Ups and
IGNs.
And IGNs, I suppose. Yeah, didn't think we'd end up saying that, but there you go, IGN.
It surprised me.
It's the meme, I suppose. Yeah. All right, that's it from us. That's the deal with Kenna as far as we see it. And stick around. I have more content soon. See you later.